Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura. And do we press or do we iron? Steam or no steam? High heat, low heat. There's so much to know about ironing. So let's cover some basic tips and techniques all about the iron. Irons have definitely changed over the centuries. They're still designed to take wrinkles out of cloth. The shape has remained the same. But other than that, there's been a lot of changes. The shape of the iron is important. This point is designed so that it spreads the fabric apart as we are pressing. If it was a flat surface, the fabric would just roll underneath and we would not be able to have that fabric separate. So no matter if it's a small iron or a large iron, that point is made to push the fabric to each side as we are pressing. And unlike the old iron, we are able to adjust the heat and have steam. And the heat settings are very important depending on the fabric. Even though that linen and cotton setting is the highest heat, it's not necessarily the best heat for the project. If our fabric is cotton and linen, then this is fine to use it on the setting. But if we have something that is very fine, if you use a hot setting, it's going to burn the fabric or melt the fabric. So that high heat is not good for all fabrics. Even though wool is a very heavy fabric, it doesn't need as much heat as a cotton or a linen. And of course, anything synthetic really does need a lower heat. When I'm quilting, I do my first pressing on a very high hot setting. And I'm also going to use the largest amount of steam because I want to take my first pressing and make sure my fabric is very flat before I start cutting it. After that, we can turn the iron down. If the iron is too hot and we press too hard, we can leave marks in the top of our fabric. Here's an example of a seam that has been pressed very hard. When we move that seam allowance out of the way, you can still see that heavy press mark. So overpressing can give us presses that we don't want. So having a little bit of a lower heat will help prevent this. Once the original fabric has been pressed and cut, we only need a slight heat to put those seams in the direction that we need. When it is then done, we can go and press. And pressing, we are doing an up-down motion versus a ironing, which is going back and forth across the fabric. When we are ironing by going back and forth across the fabric, we can stretch those fibers because they're warm and that heat and the moisture from the steam relaxes the fibers, which means it will stretch more. So by just pressing up and down, we're not changing the shape of the fabric, we're just setting the seams. If we need to press that fabric and really set those seams, but we don't want to have those marks on the other side, we can use a pressing bar. There are many different pressing bars out on the market. Some are wood, some are fabric, and in this case, this is a wool. We're going to be able to put that seam right on top of that bar. So we will only be able to press that very top piece. The side is not going to fit that flatness of the iron. So we can press and keep pressing those seams. We can also take those seams and press them open using this bar. We're not having to go around that bar. It's just going to be right along the top. So we now have that flat seam, but we didn't have to worry about pressing the other sides. When the block is all finished, we then can put that higher heat back on, give it a good steam and a good press. And this is going to help set all of those seams and make it nice and flat the way we like it to look. Some irons are set so that if you do have steam, only this steam button is going to produce steam. So you're getting a burst of steam. Other irons, like the Oliso, is going to give you continuous steam. So as long as it is down, you're going to have that continuous steaming. Once it sits upright, it's going to stop steaming. But in that upright position, we can still use the steaming feature. We can get bursts of steam so that if we need to press something like a curtain or a garment hanging on a hanger, we're going to be able to use the burst steam. So the burst steam is good for something upright or when we're really getting a stubborn wrinkle. Different temperatures and steam are also very important on the product that we are using to put on the fabric. Fleeces, fusible webs, and interfacings all take different heat settings. And if it's an item that needs a very low heat, adding a lot of heat is only going to melt the glue, not activate the glue. So it's important that we use the proper setting for the items that we're using. The tip of an iron also is a very important feature. If you look really close, you're going to see a space between the iron and the sole plate, and that is to do some detailing in pressing. If you're dressmaking, that little point is going to help us along the edges. The fabric is going to fit between the iron body and the sole plate. There is a little bit of a heating element underneath this area, which helps press that top seam as well as the bottom seam. That little point is going to help press in these smaller areas where we can't get a larger iron through. So the edge of this fabric, where the pocket is going to fit in between, and that makes that top part press as well as the bottom. It works good for front pockets as well as the back pockets, because that little tip is going to get into those little areas. What type of water you're going to use in your iron is also important. Some irons are designed for distilled water. Others, like the Olisos, are designed just to use regular tap water. And for the small one, the back just opens up. For the larger one, we do have an area on the side that we can fill. We're not having to try to put the water in through the top. The Oliso iron is quite different than the average iron because we can have it sitting down. There's a sensor at the top and a sensor underneath so that when we hold the iron or even just touch the iron, it goes down. There are feet in the bottom that come out and go back down. So when we let go of the iron, it automatically lifts the iron off of our pressing surface. However, if you don't like that feature, there is a little button on the back that can turn that feature off, so we can always place it upright. Features to look for in an iron is how much water will fit in the reservoir. If you like to do a lot of steaming, you do want a large reservoir. This particular one does take 12 ounces. And of course, the little small one will not take as much. It'll take just a little bit less than 1/4 of a cup. The little iron also has that little space between the body and the sole plate. So it does have a small detailing tip. Another important thing when we are looking for an iron is the cord. In this case, I do have a cord that swivels, which makes it very handy. If I'm left or right-handed, the cord is going to be able to stay out of my way. And in this case, if I want to have it sit upright, the cord is still fine. Irons should not be used with an extension cord. So be sure to get a cord that is nice and long. And in this case, this particular one comes with a 12-foot cord. If you do need to use an extension cord, be sure to use a cord that has a rating for a higher amperage. Irons do come with safety features. Some irons will stay warm for a couple of minutes. This particular one will stay warm for 30 minutes before it shuts off. If it does tip over, it automatically turns itself off within 3 seconds. The Mini Pro iron does not have a safety feature that turns off. So it's always going to be on, which is wonderful when we want it beside our machine so we can just pick up and press those seams as we go along. Your iron can be cleaned daily. Most of the buildup on an iron is caused from starch, starch alternatives, and the dyes and chemicals in the fabric. And they build up over time. Both the small iron and the large item can be treated the same way. Take your iron and just iron it over top of your damp cloth. Run it along the sides, and that's going to help keep it clean. So taking a minute and washing the sole plate of your iron before you start will assure that you have none of that residue transfer onto your fabric. The iron that I'm using today is the Oliso Pro Smart Iron. And that's that iron with the feet so that we can just leave it down when we're pressing. And it's the 1600 series. And I'm using the M2 Mini iron. And it has its own sole plate that you rest it on, and you can use it to hang it up. So the sole plate is a dual plate. So a lot has definitely changed since the original irons. We can get beautiful little small irons that have all of the features that we want in a large iron, but it's small and compact so we can keep them beside our machines, and they're easy to travel with. And of course, the large iron definitely has a whole lot more features than the old iron. And if we are shopping for a new iron, some of these features are important to keep in mind. How long is the cord? Does that cord swivel? How big is the water reservoir and how much steam are you going to get? Does it have a safety feature, and how long does it take for the iron to turn off once it's not being moved? And if the iron does tip over, does it have a safety feature to turn off? Does it sit up or can it sit down? It is important that we have an iron that we are comfortable with, not only the safety features, but the comfort. So next time you're looking for an iron, keep some of these features in mind. I'll put a link in the description to my Oliso Pro and to my little Oliso that I can keep beside my machine. I've always loved ironing, and this definitely gives me a whole lot more choices. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're talking about next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.